Mercedes may be one race away from the biggest Formula One scandal of 2026. Because after weeks of pressure from Ferrari, Honda, and Audi, the FIA has now launched a deeper investigation into the Mercedes engine, and insiders inside the paddock believe investigators are focusing on something terrifying. An engine that may change behavior after inspections are already completed. Not after upgrades. Not after modifications. After heat. And if the allegations are true, Antonelli's explosive rise this season could suddenly become the center of the most controversial technical battle Formula One has seen in years. Here is why teams are panicking. The Mercedes engine reportedly passed every FIA inspection while cold. Completely legal on paper. But rival engineers believe that once the car reaches full racing temperatures, microscopic thermal expansion inside the engine may completely transform how the power unit performs on track. That sounds impossible. Until you realize the estimated advantage may have reached nearly 4/10 per lap. In Formula One, that is devastating. That is the difference between fighting for pole position and disappearing into the distance. And now the FIA is no longer treating this like normal paddock gossip. Investigators are reportedly preparing deeper inspections focused on hot operating conditions after multiple rival manufacturers demanded urgent action. Ferrari believes Mercedes pushed the rules beyond their intended limits. Honda reportedly fears the loophole changed the competitive balance of the championship itself. Audi wants answers before the situation spreads even further through the grid. And the most uncomfortable part for Mercedes is this. The team may not have technically broken the written rules at all. Because according to reports, the regulations only measured engine compression while cold. Mercedes allegedly discovered a way to exploit that detail using thermal expansion, hidden combustion behavior, and microscopic geometry changes that appeared only once the engine reached race temperatures. Now the entire paddock is waiting for one moment. Monaco. Because if the FIA changes inspection procedures there, and Antonelli suddenly loses pace overnight, the fallout inside Formula One could become explosive. But if Mercedes stays dominant anyway, then the rest of the grid may have an even bigger problem than an investigation. They may be chasing a team that was genuinely faster all along. If you love Formula One stories that expose what is really happening behind the garages, subscribe to the channel. At the beginning, Mercedes treated the accusations like background noise. That is normal in Formula One. Every dominant team gets questioned eventually. When one car suddenly becomes too fast, rival engineers immediately start searching for hidden advantages. Usually, those stories disappear after the FIA checks the car and clears it. But this situation never disappeared. It became bigger after every race. Because something about the Mercedes performance looked wrong to the rest of the grid. Not illegal at first glance. Just unnatural. Antonelli's acceleration out of slow corners immediately caught attention during the opening races. Engineers studying telemetry noticed the Mercedes was gaining speed in areas where the power delivery should already have flattened out. That sounds technical, but imagine two identical cars leaving a traffic light. One accelerates normally. The other suddenly gets a second burst of power halfway down the road. That was the feeling rival teams kept seeing in the data. And this is where paranoia inside the paddock started growing fast. Because the FIA had already inspected the Mercedes engine multiple times. Every inspection came back legal. No illegal fuel system. No hidden battery trick. No forbidden electronics. Nothing. But rival manufacturers still believed Mercedes had found something buried deep inside the regulations themselves. And eventually, engineers focused on one tiny sentence inside the 2026 engine rules. The compression ratio was only measured when the engine was cold. That detail changed everything. Because Formula One engines behave completely differently once they reach racing temperatures. Metal expands. Components shift. Pressure changes. Tiny microscopic movements happen constantly inside the engine under extreme heat. Normally, engineers try to minimize those changes. Mercedes allegedly did the opposite. According to multiple technical reports, the team may have intentionally designed engine components to expand in very precise ways once the car reached full operating temperature. And suddenly, the FIA investigation became much more serious. Because if the engine physically transformed after inspection, then rival teams believed Mercedes had effectively created two versions of the same power unit. One version for the FIA garage, another version for the race itself. That is the accusation causing huge tension right now. Not traditional cheating. Something more sophisticated. One report suggested Mercedes developed a special connecting rod alloy that slightly lengthened under heat, allowing the piston to travel higher inside the cylinder during racing conditions. Another theory claimed the cylinder head itself subtly deformed inward once temperatures increased. Both effects sound tiny. Because they are tiny. We are talking about fractions of a millimeter. But Formula One operates at microscopic levels. A tiny aerodynamic edge can decide championships. A microscopic engine advantage can destroy an entire grid. And then came the theory that truly terrified rival teams: the hidden micro-combustion chamber. Reports claimed Mercedes may have designed a secondary cavity inside the engine that helped the power unit remain legal during cold inspections, before effectively sealing itself off once temperatures rose on track. If true, the implications are enormous. Because the engine could potentially behave far more aggressively during races than during FIA checks. And according to estimates from multiple technical analyses, the total gain may have been worth up to 4/10 per lap. That is a terrifying number in Formula One. 4/10 changes strategy, confidence, tire management, overtaking, everything. And suddenly, Antonelli became the center of the entire controversy. Not because people doubted his talent. Actually, the opposite. The rookie looked so naturally comfortable inside the W17 that rival teams started questioning whether the engine itself was making the car easier to drive at the limit. Smoother acceleration, better traction, more stable power delivery. And this is where the FIA reportedly started paying much closer attention after Miami. After Miami, the atmosphere inside Formula One reportedly changed completely. Because until that weekend, Mercedes still had one layer of protection: uncertainty. Rival teams suspected something. Fans debated theories online. Engineers whispered behind closed doors. But nobody could point to one moment and say, "There. That is the proof." Miami may have changed that. Because by then, the FIA had already shut down Mercedes' earlier AMG UK deployment system. Most teams expected the silver arrows to slow down immediately. Instead, Antonelli looked terrifyingly fast again. And that is what triggered a second wave of panic across the paddock. Because suddenly, rival engineers realized the controversial electrical system may not have been the real source of the advantage at all. The engine itself remained the center of the mystery. Telemetry comparisons after qualifying reportedly showed acceleration behavior that still looked abnormal even without the earlier electrical deployment advantage. That detail is incredibly important. Because Formula One engineers can usually explain performance gains: lower drag, better traction, superior tire preparation. There is almost always a logical answer. But according to reports from inside the paddock, the Mercedes data after Miami created more questions than answers. And this is where pressure on the FIA exploded. Ferrari reportedly pushed harder for immediate intervention. Honda demanded deeper technical clarification. Audi supported expanded inspection procedures before Monaco. Not because they had definitive evidence of cheating, but because they feared Mercedes had effectively outsmarted the inspection process itself. That is a completely different level of controversy. Because if true, Mercedes did not simply build a powerful engine. They built an engine specifically optimized around when and how the FIA measured it. And honestly, that idea terrified rival manufacturers. Imagine studying for an exam while another student somehow already knows exactly which questions will appear beforehand. Even if both students technically follow the rules, the advantage becomes enormous. That is how many inside Formula One reportedly viewed the Mercedes situation after Miami. And now the governing body appears ready to respond aggressively. Reports indicate the FIA is preparing new hot condition verification procedures starting from Monaco. That sounds like a minor technical adjustment. It is not. It could completely expose whether the Mercedes engine behaves differently once fully heated during racing conditions. And suddenly, Monaco becomes far more than just another Grand Prix. It becomes a test. Not only for Mercedes. For Antonelli too. Because the rookie is now driving under extraordinary pressure. Every lap he sets is immediately questioned. Every qualifying advantage gets analyzed frame by frame. Every straight-line gain becomes another reason for rival teams to complain. And that creates a very uncomfortable situation inside Mercedes. Because even if the team believes everything they created was technically legal, perception inside Formula One can become brutal very quickly. Fans do not separate technical legality from competitive fairness. Neither do rival teams. If Monaco arrives and Mercedes suddenly loses multiple tenths, the paddock reaction could become explosive overnight. People will connect the dots instantly. But here is the part making the situation even more dangerous for the rest of Formula One. Some teams still believe Mercedes has genuine pace left even after all the controversy. That possibility changes everything. Because if the FIA tightens inspections, changes the procedures, increases scrutiny, and Antonelli still wins anyway, then Formula One may be forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. Mercedes may not have built an illegal engine. They may have simply built the smartest one. And now Mercedes faces the most dangerous phase of the entire controversy. Because Formula One history shows something very important. The FIA rarely changes inspection procedures in the middle of a season unless pressure inside the paddock becomes impossible to ignore. That is exactly where this situation appears to be heading now. At first, Mercedes looked untouchable. The engine passed inspections. The FIA publicly allowed the system. And internally, many people believed rival teams would eventually give up complaining. Instead, the opposite happened. The more Mercedes kept performing, the more aggressive the pressure became behind closed doors. And there is one reason for that. The performance curve never behaved the way rivals expected. Australia, China, Japan, Miami. Even after one controversial system was already removed, Mercedes still remained frighteningly competitive. That scared the entire grid. Because normally, when the FIA bans a major advantage, lap times immediately drop. But Antonelli kept finding speed. And suddenly, rival teams started asking a terrifying question. What if the controversial systems were only amplifying an already dominant car? That possibility changes the entire emotional balance of the championship. Because if Mercedes still holds genuine pace underneath all the engine controversy, then the rest of the field may have a much bigger problem than a loophole. They may simply be behind. And honestly, some insiders already believe that is true. Reports after Miami suggested Mercedes still held advantages in overall chassis balance, energy management, and drivability even without some of the disputed systems. That last part matters more than most people realize. Drivability. In Formula One, raw horsepower alone does not automatically create dominance. Usable performance does. A car that gives drivers confidence under acceleration becomes dramatically easier to push at the limit. Earlier throttle application. More aggressive corner exits. Less rear instability. And Antonelli looked comfortable inside the W17 almost immediately. That is extremely unusual for a rookie. Especially under brand new regulations. Most young drivers spend months adapting to unpredictable power delivery and tire behavior. Antonelli drove like somebody who trusted the car completely from the opening races. And rival engineers noticed that very quickly. Some reportedly believed the hidden thermal engine behavior may not only have increased power, but also stabilized the way the power arrived during acceleration phases. That is enormous. Because smooth power delivery changes everything for a driver. Imagine trying to sprint across ice. If the surface feels unstable, you hesitate. But if the surface suddenly gives perfect grip, confidence explodes instantly. That may be what Antonelli experienced inside the Mercedes. And now Monaco becomes the moment where Formula One could finally discover the truth. Because once the FIA introduces hot condition inspections, Mercedes may lose not only outright performance, but also the hidden balance and drivability advantages that made the car so terrifying early in the season. And this creates unbelievable pressure inside the team right now. Not panic. Expectation. Because everybody inside Formula One understands what happens next. If Monaco arrives and Mercedes suddenly loses several tenths, the entire paddock will treat that as confirmation that the FIA investigation hit something important. The accusations will become louder. The scrutiny will become brutal. Every Antonelli result from the opening races will get re-examined again. But if Mercedes stays dominant, then the narrative flips completely. The criticism weakens. The investigations suddenly look less devastating. And Antonelli transforms from controversial rookie sensation into something much more dangerous for the rest of the grid. The future face of Formula One. Because if he keeps winning after all this pressure, after all these inspections, after all these accusations, then rival teams may be forced to accept the one possibility they were desperately hoping was not true. Mercedes may have pushed the regulations to the absolute limit, and still built the fastest car legally anyway.